Back in 2012, I was really interested in putting together a series of music that would follow the trail of the Underground Railroad, that would start with some newly written music down in the Deep South and work its way up to New York and close to the Canadian border. And in talking to a whole bunch of people, trying to put together some a series of concerts, so some new research came to my attention because of a colleague of mine, Martha Swan, okay, who was doing some work with the John Brown Farm, and it's new research that was really interesting story, a story that wasn't the kind of story that ends up in the high school textbook about the Underground Railroad or about abolition or slavery, and Martha was telling me about this thing that happened in the Adirondacks in the 1840s and 50s, where at that point African American men who were free could only vote if they owned 40 acres of land. So it was another way to suppress their vote in the 1840s. And so a bunch of abolitionists, led by Gerrit Smith, including Frederick Douglass, John Brown, a bunch of other big names there, they decided, since they couldn't change the law, they didn't have the votes to change the law, why not just fulfill it? And so Gerrit Smith gave away about 120,000 acres to about 3,000 black farmers. And by doing so, they could vote. But in the midst of that, there's a whole bunch of human drama. There's the drama of these people that left their homes, mostly in cities that weren't farmers, to go up to the Adirondacks to be a farmer, which is already a hard thing, and then to be a farmer in the Adirondacks, it's even harder because of the climate. And their struggles to build a farm, their struggles to work within the Adirondack community in this pre-Civil War time period. Once I heard the story about this, it was clear that we needed more research. We needed more history books. We needed more, journal articles about this. But the more that I heard about it, the more that I realized that it was a story that was too big just for the written page. It was a story that really deserved all the drama, all of the emotion that can be delivered by a musical setting. So because of that, we put together 5 or 6 musical settings. They were choral songs of some of the texts coming from people who lived through this experiment that John Brown called Timbuktu. And coming out of that first concert, the audience also pretty much recognized that this was a story that needed to be told, and needed to be told in grand fashion. And so there's no better way to tell the story of human beings living through the big dramas of history. No better art form to do that with than opera. I know as a composer, there's sometimes when I just want to write a piece of music because I have the vision of the final project, and I write it and it's done. Okay, that's fine. Okay, if I'm working all by myself, but this was a very different kind of project. Here in this case, my job as the composer was not just to write music that I wanted to write. My job was to be in contact with a whole bunch of different people in the Adirondack community over time, have a bunch of conversations with lots of different people, and out of the midst of those conversations to pull it together into one narrative, one expression of what has now turned into be a 5-year conversation. And so for me, it's been just terrific. I just really enjoy being the composer that's in the midst of a crowd. And so, when we started out the project 5 years ago, we didn't start out with the vision that happened okay, in this last concert. We started off with some fundamentally good ideas, a lot of great people, a couple of institutions that were willing to back us up, to support us, that had confidence in what we were doing. And that laid the foundation for what we were able to do, in this last concert. It seems like the opera world today faces a lot of challenges. In Mozart's time, opera was not only something that was an art form, for the kings and queens and princes and princesses. It was also an art form for the average person on the street. And I think since Mozart's time, there's been this continual march to operas being produced in more urban environments, in environments that have a narrower and narrower demographic of the people that are showing up for them, to the point where, when we started talking about opera in the Adirondacks, a whole bunch of people said, "That's not us. Okay, that's something else. That's something that people do in New York City or Nashville or Los Angeles or something like that. It's, Rome or Austria. That's not us. Opera's that other thing." But the more Helen DeMung and I talk to people about it, they realize that opera is just simply a story that is sung. And you can sing it in lots of different ways, okay? And so because of this, what was really exciting in the process of working with the Adirondack community on developing Promised Land was that it was an opera that grew out of these fundamental conversations about their history, but also fundamental conversations about their perception of opera. So this is a project that was created in a profoundly rural area. It was born out of an idea. It was born out of a handful of institutions that have helped us out with different parts of it. But up to this point, okay, it's been developed outside kind of the normal. Or perhaps the anticipated way that a new opera would be written. A big company would commission a composer. The composer writes it, thank you and good night, and that's good. Okay. Here, this is a long process that was born out of this very rural area, and now we've gotten to the point where we have something. Creating artwork in the midst of a crowd, okay, is a different process than just doing it by yourself. And in that way, as an artistic creator, in my case a composer, my job is to listen very deeply to the people that I'm working with and to pull a bunch of ideas into a singular expression. For Promised Land, we talked to a lot of people. We had formal residencies in the Saranac Lake School District. Middle schoolers and high schoolers did research on the project, did primary source research on the project, created reports about that, and then coming out of those reports, I sat with those kids and said, okay, what part of these things that you studied do we need to sing about? And in that conversation with those kids, we pulled out a couple of the quotes, figured out how we wanted to express those things, knowing who we were expressing it to, the Adirondack community. And then out of that, okay, I put together some rough drafts of the project, came back, showed it to the kids. We had an editing session together, and then that led to a concert performance of those musical works. Okay, so there's one example of how we kind of entered into a conversation with, in this case, a public school district. But as we've gone along, we've had we've had chats at museums, at regional institutions of higher education. Paul Smith's College has been a center for a whole bunch of these conversations. We've had chats at the coffee shops with grandmothers about things, about other local arts leaders, local business leaders, historians, okay, like Martha and the people she's working with, and so in the midst of this, it's been such a joy to have such a wide variety of people, a great diversity of people in the Adirondacks interested in retelling this part of their history. I've written music in the past that has historical texts. Okay, music that refers to the music culture of that time or place, perhaps, or just brand new, original music to go with it. In this case, there was something about the story that was different. We had to pay attention to this underlying element of the story. The reason why these 3,000 black men got the vote in the 1850s was because of the land. Because they were working the land. They had a relationship with the Adirondack landscape, okay, becoming farmers. So if the land was central to the story, the land had to be central to the opera. One way of doing that is a particularly compositional process that's called sonification. Okay, I could look out to the Adirondack mountains, and I could write music just sort of out of my mind and out of my heart. That's my sort of emotional response to those mountains, right? That's fine. I do that a lot. That's a good way to write music. Sonification is a slightly different strategy, though. Okay, it's not a subjective response to those mountains. Okay, my individual response, but it's actually more of an objective response to the natural landscape, where we actually take scientific data that comes from the land, and with a little bit of modular mathematics, we can express that data in music. Now, we all know how to take a list of numbers and make a visual graph, taking numbers, turning it into a picture. In sonification, what a composer does is that we take numbers and we turn it into music. And so, in this case, I worked with a Paul Smith's College scholar, Dr. Kurt Steger, who's done some amazing work on climate science in the Adirondacks. And what we were able to do was to take some of the lake core samples that he had taken. Okay, lake core samples meaning that he drilled down into the bottom of one of the Adirondack lakes and discovered the environmental history going all the way back to the Roman Empire of what was going on in the Adirondacks. What we did is that we took the slice of that data that represents the time of Timbuktu, okay, so late 1840s to early 1860s, and we took the data that he had, okay, that was talking about the oxygen levels, about a bunch of other things that was happening in the Adirondack climate at that time, and then I sonified that data. That turned into some sound, and then we plugged that sound into the piece Procession of the Pines. Okay, so when we hear Procession of the Pines, the song that comes from the Ralph Waldo Emerson poem, The Adirondacks, the kind of last 1/3 of the piece, okay, is this moment where the piano comes in, and what we bring in is a sonification of the Adirondack climate in the 1850s. So through this process of working with Kurt, we were able to embed the land right into the musical score in a very objective kind of way. If we had started this project, with with a large opera company. My job would have been to write the music, and that would have been it. Okay. But since this was a community project, this was a grassroots project, everyone who was involved in it had many roles. And so, for me, okay, my primary role was to write the music. Okay. But I was also, doing a little bit of my own research to add to the, the work that had been done by other historians. I was teaching classes at Paul Smith's College about this and engaging undergraduate students in the conversations, which of course kind of works the ideas a bit, and I get their feedback. And learn more about the material through those conversations. But then also, to make the whole thing happen, we needed some money, and so I'm also the primary grant writer for the project. Okay, working with a variety of private foundations and state and federal funding sources that have helped us to pay for our musicians, to pay for our recording engineers, and to get those sorts of things done. But even with that role, as an event would come up, as we do, one of our many concerts, okay, just out of necessity, I would take on other roles, okay, helping out with publicity, helping out with logistics and those sorts of things, coordinating community members to come in and set up the risers for the concert, those kinds of things, and in many ways, I think that helps to identify what kind of project this is, okay, because I wore many hats, but everybody wore many hats, and everyone stretched what stretched beyond the core competencies, the places where they felt comfortable. Everyone kind of reached out and rolled up their sleeves in so many ways over the last 5 years to make this happen. The most challenging part of what we've done over the last 5 years is that while operas have been made for a long time, there really is no operations manual for creating a grassroots opera in a rural area. We asked a lot of questions of other folks that do similar kinds of work, but there was no way to prepare for what we just did. Okay, it was a day-to-day solving of problems. Okay, of figuring out what needed to be done, going out and doing those things, finding folks to help us out with those things. And in the process, okay, every time we got one thing done, we figured out 3 other things that had to get done because we really were, just as the Timbuktu farmers were digging their farms out of the Adirondack soil, we were digging this opera out of the heart and soul of a whole bunch of people, and the history of the Adirondacks. And so, I think that on the most challenging part of it is that we really had to come up with our game plan as we went along, and with all the successes and all the mistakes that we made along the way, really happy that we've made it to this point. Being a composer is a lot like being a parent, insofar as a parent, okay, you play a pivotal role in the creation of this new life that you hold in your hands, right? And then as that new life grows, okay, your son or your daughter meets new people and grows in ways that A, you don't have control over, okay, and B, grows in ways that are just marvelous because other folks see things in your children that hard for you to see as a parent because you're a parent, okay? And that's been my experience of raising my son and daughter. It's been so amazing to watch them grow when they meet new people and travel to new places. Well, being a composer is a lot like that. okay, because I put the notes on the page of this new musical life, and then I hand it off to a bunch of other people, and in the process of that, the kind of raw ideas that I put down on the paper are actually brought to life. And each new person that steps forward into that music brings their life, their history, their background and their skill to realizing what's on the page. And so for me, while I'd heard, the individual songs, or most of the individual songs I'd heard over the years of concerts that we've done to test them out, this was the first time I heard the whole thing together, and it was like watching my son or daughter walk across the graduation stage. Okay, that here was this culmination of not just my work as a composer, but this culmination of all the people that have helped that music come together. In the same way that a high school graduation is the culmination of all those people that have led to the unique people that my children are. It's been great to hand off this new life to so many talented people, both from the Adirondacks and also from around the country, who brought this music to life. Why should we tell a story of voting rights initiative in the 1840s and 50s in the Adirondacks? We need to tell the story not just because it happened and we can say that it happened. We need to retell that story because so much of it is relevant today. Democracy is not the kind of project that once you've passed a couple laws, passed a little Bill of Rights, a little Constitution, you're done. Okay, democracy is an ever-unfolding project. It's a project that starts with a lot of improvisation, and then eventually, okay, after you've improv'd a lot, you've wrestled with problems that you've never figured out before. Okay, just like in a jazz combo, the piano player throws a little music over to the saxophone player and throws it back. In democracy, you throw those things back and forth until then you can write it down on the page, and it becomes a new law. We needed to tell this story not just because it's an untold story that's good to tell. We had to tell it because, first of all, it carves out the territory of the contribution the Adirondacks made to this national discussion, this national struggle for racial equality. In our history books, we learn what happened in Philadelphia. Okay, we learn what happened in Washington, D.C., but we don't read about what happened in the Adirondacks. And so on one side, it's a chance for us to celebrate our contribution to this big national story. But secondly, the other reason to do it is that as a democracy, we're not done yet. And the only way we can look at those challenges that face us today is through the lens, through the filter, through the song of those stories that have come before us. I know some people say history repeats itself. Other folks say that history rhymes. It's not exactly repeating, but has kind of similar themes. As a composer, I'd like to say that that our national democracy is a song in which we keep writing new verses to. Okay, and this is and the Timbuktu story, the story of Promised Land, is a new verse to one of the most important songs that we continue to sing generation after generation, with lots of harmonies of people of different skin colors and different genders, of different ideas that come together to sing all those harmonies in what is our American song. And here in Promised Land, we just wanted to add a new verse to it.